午後の部はですね、こういった API の説明からですね、コントリビューションの仕方、そういったところをメインに、取り上げていきたいと思います。引き続きですね、講師はウィル、チャンになります。で、資料ですけども、今日のウィルの、資料は、取り急ぎですね、スライドシェアに上げています。ウィルの資料は、こちらです、上の方ですね。で、シェンの資料が下の方。で、ツイッター持ってらっしゃる方は、CS ゼロで多分最新のつぶやきにですね、このリンクがツイートしましたので、こちらからも取れます。大丈夫ですか？はい、映っていいですか？大丈夫そうです。はい、じゃあ続きまして、シェンの方から、始めたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
Thank you. Hopefully you had a good lunch. I hope you did. Food is always good here in Japan, much better than the US. I can tell you that. Okay, so for this afternoon, we're going to talk about how to integrate against Cloud Stack, specifically through the Web Services API, and what you can do in the UI in terms of some minor customization. I'll give you a little bit of some example of how you can do that. So again, what I hope you will learn after this session is how we can change the Cloud Stack UI through modification of the CSS that's already there. I'm going to show you an example of how you can add a button to the Cloud Stack UI, and also how to generate a link of that to inside the Cloud Stack UI. I'm also going to be talking about how we deal with certain security holes within browsers, specifically cross-site request forwarding or SRF attacks. We'll explain what that means. I will also talk a little bit about how we deal with some simple single sign-on, at least from another product, single signing on to Cloud Stack. And then a little bit about how we localize Cloud Stack UI. And then the second part about the session will be working with the API itself. Not many of you know, but we have different ways of authenticating or making calls with the Web Services API. And I'll explain how the session-based authentication is different than the usual Amazon way of signing the API request. Then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of how you specifically sign requests. I know a lot of people have confusion about how you generate a signature. And then I'll talk about the differences between asynchronous command and synchronous command. And lastly, I'll show you a couple of things about the response format generated and how we deal with pagination with the API calls that we can make. So before I go into my slides, I wanted to give you guys a brief demo of the Cloud Stack UI. I know you saw a little bit in the lightning talks, but I just want to quickly give you a 5-minute demo of what the Cloud Stack UI does. So in the Cloud Stack UI, it is completely written in using just HTML, CSS, and we use jQuery as our JavaScript library to manipulate objects within the UI itself. But it's purely making AJAX calls to the Cloud Stack API itself. What you see here is really the default UI that comes out of the box of the default installation. I'm going to go over some tips and tricks of what you can do to change that for your own purpose. But what I'm going to do is, for this part of the demo, I'll spend about 5-10 minutes on kind of the overall features. Before I log in, I can show you, many of you already know that through localization, I can change the language to Japanese or Chinese. This is going to take a bit longer because the server is in the US. I believe this is Chinese. So I'm going to attempt to do a demo in Japanese. So if I make a mistake, I'm sorry. So what I'm going to do is log in as the admin. So this is the default dashboard for the root admin UI. What you see here is the left navigation of all the classic features that the administrator can access to. I would say the classic UI probably implements in the upwards of 95% of all the classic admin API today. There's probably about 5% that we don't do, but I would say it at least makes calls to 95% of all the functionality that we have in admin API. What the dashboard was meant to do is to quickly show any alerts or any notification for the administrator to see when he logs in. So whether a host is disconnected or being crashed, and that's what we want to show it. We also show where the most used resources are at the bottom of the dashboard. So in here, I can see 10 out of the 20 IP addresses have already been consumed in terms of the MAC IP. I can see that, for example, disk or something like that. I can see how much resource was consumed. So this kind of gives you a high-level overview of what that is. I'm going to quickly move over to projects. Okay, so this is where an admin is going to configure his zone. Right? This is where, as a cloud stack operator, you're going to come in here and you're going to add a zone into the cloud. I'm not going to add one. I'm going to show you that for this particular instance, we have one zone that we have configured. And within this zone, I'm going to show you that it has 3 different hypervisor clusters configured within the same pod. I have VMware host, I have KVM host, I also have a Zen server host configured, or cluster configured within this pod for this zone. So CloudStack supports all this today. We also have ways of showing you the network resources per zone as well. So we can show you the total CPU consumed, IP addresses, how many VLANs consumed, and we track all this stuff per zone as well. And then in terms of configuring a network, we have ways of configuring a public network, management network, guest network, and the other network we have. And this particular section right here, I don't think we have any this table, but this is where you would be able to add your NetScale and your Net5 as direct to the cloud. And then configure network offerings to take advantage of these physical resources. But for this demo, there's nothing there except the virtual router. If I go quickly to the instance tab, you'll see that as an administrator, the idea of the UI is to hopefully quickly give you the overall glance of the resources that's available in the cloud. And even though you can click it and the tab will slide over with various functionality, the goal of this thing was to not have to do that. So 90% of your time you go to look at this and you do whatever you need to do, which is start, stop, or just work through the virtual router. But with the breadcrumb features that we've added in, and tab features, and ways to continue to look down the resources, I can keep drilling down to root disk. I can see the root disk. I can probably see snapshots. There's probably nothing there. And then, of course, what we've also built into the UI is a wizard for users to come in here and launch a VM. So this should be very familiar with you. We only have one zone, but as a user, if I want to create a virtual machine, I should be able to select the availability zone to put my virtual machine in. I can also create it either through a template or maybe an ISO cookies. And then as part of the second selection, I want to select the template. I want to select basically the OS and function, any application that I may use. Now some people may only have one base template and use something like Puppet or Chef to automatically install the application on top. So we've seen both ways. So you can either create many templates, you can use ISO to boot, or you can even have a base default template and use Puppet or Chef to install the application on one template. So you don't have to do this, create any number of combinations of templates within CloudStack. But again, we have the feature here, and And so you can, the admin can set feature templates. You can have templates that are owned by me, or maybe even a local community template that's submitted by other users of Cloudstack. As I move along the wizard, as you can see on this side right here, it's showing you, it's trying to simulate building a VM, because a lot of consumers come in and don't even know what a lot of these things mean. So we try to visualize this with the user as well. So here is your service offering. This defines the compute power of the VM. Here, this is an example of small instances, a CPU 500 megahertz and 512 meg RAM, and it costs X amount of money. These are all customizable within the UI. And this would be disk volume, and very similar to service offering. I can choose small, medium, large disk. And as the administrator, you can configure any number of these offerings. And again, as I said before, if you choose an offering, this particular offering may create the disk ID on one particular primary storage, whereas this one can create it on a completely different primary storage. This is all customizable by the administrator. Moving on here, this is where I can put my VM onto various networks that's available. For now, there is a shared network that the administrator had created that's available for everyone. The reason why I share is because if I put typically there's no isolation here at all. It's really a layer 2 network with no isolation. So if I create it here and someone else created a VM there, then unless that administrator had done something to prevent access, they're going to be able to see each other. I can also put the same VM on various other networks that I have created. This is 2 different isolated networks that I've created for myself. I can choose any of these to be my default gateway for the VM. Or I can in fact create a brand new network or to put the new one. And this was never available in 2.2. This is all on the Windows 3.1 platform. I'm not going to go all the way through because I'm not sure how to resource that. Okay, well, I don't need to show you anymore, but beyond that, it was click the rest and it would create a new itself. Another quick thing I want to show you is the networking part. So I can always take this is where I was talking about the layer 2 isolated network with a virtual router that's between a public network and a guest network. So if I go into here for this particular network, I can see that's my public IP address, and I can change various settings. I can change firewall rules within that. I can say for a particular source seeder, I can allow access into my guest network. So yeah, I can add load balancer rules again, create anything that I want, or 80 to 8080, and select my algorithm, and then we'll go on and select the various VMs that I want to run. And of course, port 40 rules, same thing, very similar. So Cloudstack, what it does is, so even if you have NetScaler or F5 sitting behind here, the UI is the same. The API, web services API today is the same. So the user does not know it's programming the virtual router or F5 or any of the physical appliances today. And I think that's good enough to give you an overview about the UI. I'm sure if you install this product, you're going to be able to see a lot more. So the first thing I want to do is explain how you can customize some of the UI. So most of the customers that deploy Cloudstack today do a variety of things. Number one, they always almost change their user UI. No service provider wants to have the same look and feel as everybody else. So typically they would change their logo or change some color scheme to fit their corporate color scheme. Second way of doing that we've seen is almost a major change to the UI itself. Like there's significant changes. Almost the UI is not even identical anymore. the third thing is they don't even use the user API now. They have their own portal out there that makes direct calls to the web services API. But for this thing, I just want to tell you some of the little tweaks you can do in UI today. So right now, it's built, the CloudStack UI is built in HTML4. In the future, we are looking into HTML5 and using features like Canvas or WebSockets to do a little bit more cool things in front of UI. But for now, it's all built on HTML4, CSS, and jQuery Effects 4. We do use JSP pages today, only for localization. We use the resource bundle technology, and that's how you can localize all your text from one language to another. We did toy around with having client-side localization, but that didn't work too well. It was just too slow. But if any of you guys have better ideas of how to do localization without Java server pages, I would gladly, take that and implement this into UI, because I feel like there's almost no reason for me to use it other than the fact that I need to localize and do server-side translation of the text rather than client-side. So if any of you guys have better ideas, please let the CloudStack community know, and hopefully someone will have a better solution to this. And then I talked about kind of the customization you can do today. Okay, so again, this is just a quick look at what the UI looks today. And what I want to show you is some of the places that you can change the UI or quickly change it. So in CloudStack today, there is a major CSS file. And if you know if you've ever worked with CSS, the way you include the CSS within the HTML page, the very last include always wins. So you can have the same CSS definition anywhere, but the very last one that you include into the HTML file, that's the one that the browser is going to use. So typically what you would do here is, if you want to create your own CSS changes, you just have to create a new CSS file and override any of the changes you see here or within the default CSS file. That way you can deal with upgrades or merging with changes from each CloudStack version that gets released. So just a quick couple of places you can change. For example, you can change the logo. You can change some of the top color. Even some of the tags you can change as well. The breadcrumb color, you can change the button and how it looks. And you can even change some of the color scheme on the left hand itself. So again, these are some examples of what you can do. For example, if I want to change the logo, I would find the CSS called header div.logo. I can go in there and replace logo.png or call whatever graphic you want and replace that yourself. Similarly, if I want to change some of the colors on the navigation bar, you can do the same thing. Go to power navigation, the UI space li, and you can change some of the background images and things like that. This is going to require some knowledge of CSS. And so if I take this page that I had before and I simply did some minor tweaks to the CSS file, I can in fact change this pretty quickly. Like, CSS is a pretty powerful tool today. You can simply change the color. I can even change the logo back to .com logo. These are pretty simple changes you can do in the UI today. And it requires CSS knowledge. Even though I did not include all the ways you can do it, the best way to really understand what you can change is to use any of the browsers today. They have something very similar to a Firebug tool for Firefox. If any of you guys have played with Firebug before, it allows you to inspect the CSS or any of the elements within an HTML page. You can find which of the CSS you can modify. The next thing I want to kind of show you is how can you add a navigation button on the left side. I know a lot of partners today want to say, look, I want to implement a monitoring solution or some type of first class or a major feature into CloudStack. How can I put my navigation bar into CloudStack? So here's another way of doing it. Again, it's simply monitoring. Well, this one is a little more complicated because you have to modify some JavaScript code in order to get this. But for right now, what this does is with JavaScript file cloud stack.js, there is a sections declaration there that allows you to declare what you want for the new button to be. So you can, what I just called it, test section. Once you do that, within the index.jsp, which is the default page, you would add your own what we call template, but that's really the area where you, after you click, it shows up. And then inside the section here, there's I know I just declared from the previous page, but if you come down here, you can actually show some of the titles, and then a function you can declare is what happens when I click that button. And for this particular case, it's going to take that template and add it back to the page. So this is a very simple template that just says test section. That's it. But it can be much more complicated, much more feature-rich. The next section here is about who can see this section. So if I was, if you only want an admin to see it or not admin to see it, this is the section where you can declare that. And again, I just added each section that's out there. And this is saying that if it's an admin, I can see the new tab. And then the last thing that you can do is if you want to add an optional icon to the left of the navigation tab. So again, if I took this page and I applied some type of test alterations to this, I can simply create a new left nav that's on the left side. If I click on it, the default page says test section, but again, you can have whatever you want. So briefly on the UI, I know we quickly went through this, but there's a lot more things you can do. What the UI team is planning in the future is to widgetize a lot of the components that is already there. So if you, for the future, for example, you don't have to develop your own pagination, you don't have to develop the little sliding pattern, you can leverage whatever is already there in CloudStack today and use those as widgets for what you want to feature. So that's kind of some of the future work the CloudStack UI team is doing, along with HTML5 functionality. So this one is actually pretty important. What is cross-site request forward rate? If I want to summarize this is a case where someone could execute a command on your behalf without you knowing. And how would you do this? Well, a very simple example I can give is today in most websites, if you log, let's take your bank account for instance. If you log into your bank account with your username and password, after you log in, every click you do after that, you don't have to log in anymore. So there is some session that is established between the browser and the server that uniquely identifies you, but there's enough security there so that each click that you do, the bank will say, yes, I believe it is who you are that is clicking that link. Now, if you don't protect for this, what could happen is if you log into the bank account, a malicious person could give you an email or an image or any type of link that can execute JavaScript calls. And you may click on it by accident, but because you are logged in, you may unintentionally do something you didn't want to do. So how do we protect this in the CloudStack UI today? So what we do is, after every login command that after you submit your username and password, we will give you a JSession cookie back. That is the default cookie that's returned back by the Tomcat server. So there's nothing new about this. Every request we return back, we put a cookie there, and every request we send back to the server, you have to give that same cookie. So, but that is just not enough. If you just have the cookie itself, because every request, if you just have the cookie and you send the request back, someone could give, the malicious user can create a malicious API key, and it doesn't matter because the browser will automatically put this cookie into that request, and you could end up doing something that you never intended to do. And the way to get around this problem is now that every time you log in, not only do you have a JSession cookie that you send back, we also return back another parameter called session key. And that's a random string, random token that we generate per login. And you now must send it on every request this session cookie that we give you upon login and the default cookie. So the reason why this will work is because this is randomized each time and it has to be in the URL as part of the request query. There's almost no way anyone's going to guess what that cookie is. What that token is. So they don't, a malicious user is not going to know session ID, they're not going to know this, but this one is always automatically appended by the browser, which is why you can get to a state where someone could execute a command on behalf. So CloudStack is, the UI is already protected. This is how we prevent someone from going there and executing a command that you didn't want to. Another thing I want to talk about briefly is how we do a simple single sign-on. In this case, there's two ways you do single sign-on. One is if the portal is where the user login is not CloudStack. The default login is some other portal. They click a link and then automatically they single sign on to CloudStack. That's what I'm going to describe with this. The other way would be you log into CloudStack UI, you click another link and it single signs to someone else's external system. So that one we don't do today. We don't have that capability today. That's something we will want to solve in the future to have a standardized way. If you were a user to log into CloudStack UI and I click on the link, how do I single sign directly to someone else's portal or whatever? So we don't have that today. So if you wanted to be the main portal and have a link that redirects to CloudStack UI, this is how I'm going to explain how we do that with CloudStack. So to do this, there is a key called single sign-on by session key somewhere in the global settings that is generated. It generates a key once. And that key is something that you would share with the external portal. And what happens today is, in order to single sign in, you would make the same login command that everyone else uses, except that you don't have to pass in password. You just need to pass in the username, the timestamp, I guess the domain ID, and the signature of that command itself. And the way you generate that signature is the exact same way you would generate for any other API request using the API key and secret key. And I'll go over those. Oh yeah, that's funny. So I do have a global setting entry, and this would contain the shared key, and this would contain how much time that particular generated signature is valid for. So it would prevent some replay attacking of that. The reason why you don't need to pass in the API key is because I already know who you are. You're not going to be any different. There's no multiple sign-in. If there are in the future, then that's something we'll have to fix. But right now, it only assumes one external portal as the incoming request. So if you play with anything similar to Cloud Portal today, or Cloud Portal itself, but if you play with that, that's how they do the single sign-on. And then last thing I want to cover for the UI purposes is currently today, as you saw in the UI, we already support Japanese and simplified Chinese. Again, as I explained before, we use Java Resource Bundle to do the localization. It's very easy. It's really just a messages underscore your language code .properties file. So if you ever wanted additional languages that's not Japanese or simplified Chinese, let's say German or French, your level languages, you can just take the English file, copy it, and create another file called messages.fr for French, and replace all of the English definition to French, and put it right into the webinf/resource directory, and you will instantly have support for the French language. And then again, I talked about before, the reason why we use Resource Bundle is, of course, for server-side processing. We tried client-side, it's just too slow. So again, if you guys know a better way of doing this, please let me know, or please let the cloud stack community know. And hopefully someone will